Hello, and welcome to the Rossaround Backstage podcast, talking with artists, technicians, musicians, producers, directors, and all the interesting and talented people that make it all happen for you. Hi, everybody. This is Ross Pallone with the Rossaround Backstage podcast, and I am here today with an old friend of mine, Roberto Vally. And Roberto is a bassist, he is a songwriter, a producer, and he is an artist. He has a couple albums out, and we're going to start talking to Roberto about his career. So my first question to you, Roberto, is how did you get into the music business?
Gosh. Well, I'll go back to early childhood. I always had a big love and fascination for music. I used to raid my parents' Victrola, and I wait for my father. As the story goes, he would leave for work, and I would run over to the record player, and I would take out his opera records, and I would just play them, and I just watch him spin around. And one time he pretended he was leaving, and then he came back, and I guess I jumped about 3 feet off the ground. I was so scared. But anyway, I really was attracted to music, and my parents, seeing that love and realizing that they had a boy living in America, they bought me Jailhouse Rock and Elvis's record, and they also bought me the newest Beatles record, which was Beatles 6 with 8 Days a Week and that stuff. So by the time I kind of listened to that, I was about 5 or 6, and I got a guitar and started learning a little bit of guitar on my own, and my parents gave me some piano lessons.
And how old were you at this time?
I was about 7 or 8 years old. So I had a couple of years of piano, and I was self-taught guitar guy, and the elementary school that I was in offered orchestra, and they gave all the kids in the 3rd grade a music aptitude test, and apparently I got a perfect score. The story goes, the music teacher called my mom. They said, your son has incredible ears. We'd like to get him in the orchestra. So from the whole 3rd grade class, they made one 4th grade class, like the whole 3rd grade of 100 and something kids. 4th grade, there was one class of 30 something kids that was the orchestra class. So every day we would leave our academic classroom and would go into the music room, and we would take out our instruments. So the first day of orchestra, I saw the double basses up against the wall, these big giant violins, and I was fascinated by the way they looked, and I guess I was kind of loud and rambunctious, and the teacher said, "Oh yeah, so Robert, you want to play the bass, do you?" And he put me up in the front of the class with a double bass. I never had one in my hands, and he showed me how to pluck the first 2 strings. So it was like, and he said, "Can you do this? Just do this, doom doom doom, doom doom doom." And I'm going doom. I'm plucking it, and I'm going, "Wow, this is really real cool." He says, "Don't stop." So while I'm doing this doom doom doom, he led the class singing Frère Jacques with those 2 notes that I was playing. Frère Jacques, boom, 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 doom, 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 suddenly matin. And I'm just digging into those notes. And I'll tell you, I was 9 years old, Ross, and it was like an out-of-body experience. And I'm thinking to myself, even then, like, I'm back with an old friend. This is so familiar to me. I was reconnected with something from my past. And I don't believe in reincarnation of any sorts, but it was definitely a reunification. So once I started playing bass, all bets were off, and I couldn't get enough of it in school. And then at home, 2 years later, I started playing electric bass, thanks to a counselor at the summer camp who showed me an electric bass. I didn't even know what one was. So at home with my friends, it was playing the songs of the day, Santana, Chicago, groups like that. And I had a band, and we actually were doing bar mitzvahs and sweet 16 parties. So I'm going into junior high school and I'm taking violin. And just because I was bored of the bass in the orchestra, I learned a little bit of violin. And at home, learning the pop songs, and then kind of getting into early teens, I started listening to jazz and fusion, the fusion of the day, Chick Corea and Return to Forever, Weather Report, Herbie Hancock. And in school, I was going down the classical route, and I auditioned and was accepted to Fiorello LaGuardia High School of Music and Art, which they later made the movie Fame about. Mm-hmm. And I was a double bass major there, and I started to take private...
That's high school.
That's high school, yeah. And I started to take private lessons once I was good enough to, with a professor who taught at the Juilliard School, the conservatory. So by the time I was a junior in high school, I was going to Juilliard in the preparatory division that they offered, so we had orchestra on Saturdays. So in school, it was pretty much classical and jazz, and at home it was everything else: pop, rock, funk, Kool and the Gang, Earth, Wind and Fire, Blood, Sweat and Tears. I loved it all.
You liked
because
everything.
It all had bass, and it didn't matter what I was listening to. I really didn't give a crap about the melody. I mean, I loved the melody, but I always was fascinated what was going on downstairs that supported the melody. I did my high school, and I thought I was going to maybe take a year off, and I wound up auditioning for a kind of a Tony Orlando and Dawn kind of traveling band that I found out about through a trumpet player friend, and they were looking for a bass player. So I was 18, and I went on the road with this group, and we played in Holiday Inns and Sheratons all around the country, up in Canada and Puerto Rico, resorts, and we'd be at a place for like a week at a time, 2 weeks, sometimes even a month.
You're playing like clubs?
Clubs, yeah, clubs. So the rhythm section and the singers would do like a warm-up set of Chic and whatever the music was, Bobby Caldwell, What You Won't Do for Love. That's when I first played it, when it was brand new, released in 1979. And then the singer would come out, and he would do his Elvis impersonation and Tom Jones and did his shtick. And I cut my teeth, doing that. And prior to that, again, I was in a little group called Creation in Brooklyn in my early teens, where my parents had to drive us to the gigs because the drummer's dad was a casual office leader. So he'd give us all the little teeny bopper gigs, and he'd pay us $50 each, which is not much more than I'm making now. But anyway, I was a professional at a pretty darn young age. Yeah. And one group, after this Tony Orlando and Dawn kind of group, one group led to another. I was playing upright bass in a club for a while in Florida as a house bassist, playing with men twice my age, learning this, jazz standards, and playing a bunch, and did 3 years in Alabama with a jazz rock funk band. We were like the Red Hot Chili Peppers of the day, before the Red Hot Chili Peppers, mixing rock, funk, and jazz and reggae and all this stuff. And we made a record, and people were coming to hear us. But I had the calling to go to Europe. I really wanted to do that. And I had an opportunity, and I wound up spending about 3 years in my mid-20s, spending about half the year, the summer and the winter in France, and the fall and the spring in Florida, just working. I didn't really care about like elevating my career. I was just having so much fun playing music at night and either surfing during the day or skiing.
Well, now you said you had an opportunity to go to Europe.
Yes.
What was the opportunity?
The opportunity was a buddy of mine who was a bon vivant. We actually both played together with Bobby Caldwell. He's a couple of years my senior, and he sent me a postcard from Biarritz, France, and he said, "Dude, I got work here. Why don't you come over and meet me? Let's have some fun." So I decided to make the bold move and just take my suitcase, take a bass and a small amp, and go over to Europe. And we were working, and it was all
Again,
about.
was this like a cover bands in clubs?
It was him and I, a percussionist from Dire Straits, who was a road manager, who had a girlfriend in France, and we had a drum machine, and it was just the power duo, and that was our first summer there in Biarritz, and I did 3 years of that.
Wow.
And we actually, when the summer was done, I traveled to Italy, through France and Switzerland and in Italy, and I spent a month with a backpack and a Euro pass, just going all over my country of my family. And I even went to Sicily too, because
that was a vacation.
That was a vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I reconnected with Mark in Biarritz, and I was depleted financially. I spent all the money I made in the summer on this vacation, and he floated me a little bit. We took a train to the French Alps, and within a day of arriving there, we had lodging and we had work in one particular club. Hired us out. We just went and auditioned. We have American guys to play music for our patrons. So it was a great life, and I had the opportunity through contacts I made over the years to audition for Spyro Gyra, and that was my first band of pretty big name recognition, especially at the time.
Yeah.
They were pretty big news. When we played in LA, we played at the Universal Amphitheater. We were doing venues like that. Mm-hmm. And I was, 26, 27 years old.
Was the Universal Amphitheater covered or uncovered at that point?
It was covered. It was the covered one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I was staying at the Hyatt Hotel on Sunset, with all the tour buses parked out front. They called it the Riot on Sunset. And that was my first name gig. And it was then where I got in the system, if you will. I was totally off the grid. So I had all of a sudden, I had to get some credit cards, and I got, connected, whatever. And from Spyro Gyra, I went on to work for about a year with Michael Franks, and that's when I met Bobby Caldwell, and that was my reason and excuse to move out west, because Bobby asked me, he heard me play with Michael, he asked me to do a Japanese tour with him back when he would be going there for 4 or 5 weeks at a time, and we had a month of rehearsals in Los Angeles, so I decided to make the move to the West Coast, and I play with Bobby to this day, and have managed to work with dozens of other artists and doing live performances, recording sessions, and I've also branched off co-writing for many other artists. And in the past 5 years, I've been writing songs for myself and releasing them independently. The stuff that I've written for people like Richard Elliott and Boney James and Bob James and a lot of people in the smooth jazz world, I wanted to go a little bit more personal, a little bit off of mainstream with my stuff. I'd call my music maybe a little more world, a little more chill, if you will. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So who were some of the other artists that you toured with back then?
Okay, well, from Bobby, one of my early gigs after joining Bobby's band, I was introduced to Boss Skaggs, who immediately grabbed me for a tour in Japan, and then I did about a dozen gigs with him in stateside also, and I worked with the legendary Cuban trumpeter Arturo Sandoval, and it was soon after that I joined Randy Crawford's group, and she's still pretty well known in the States, but she's really huge in Europe and in Australia, and she took me all around the world for about 10 years and got a song on one of her records that I co-wrote with her. Mm-hmm. And as you know, we both worked together with Christopher Cross.
Yeah.
And
that's how I met you.
Yes, mm-hmm. And since then I've worked with Diane Shore for several years, and we did many lovely shows together. And a lot of artists in smooth jazz, like Peter White, and I've done recordings for George Benson, written songs for Kirk Whalum, who played saxophone with Whitney Houston, and Richard Elliott and Dave Koz. I played on most of his first Summer Horns record that was nominated for a Grammy. And Paul Brown, who's like the baby face of producers in the smooth jazz world. I've been on all of his records, and when he is doing a recording project, I'm his first call. So I owe him a lot. He put a lot of my songs on other people's records, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I have a pretty good knack for starting a portrait, if you will, and making it interesting enough where an artist will hear the portrait and say, oh, yeah, man, I kind of like your landscape. I'm going to add a house right over here, which would be the melody, if you will. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm trying to think of, I just started playing with David Benoit
Mm-hmm.
and Marc Antoine. They made a lovely Brazilian jazz record called So Nice. And we have about 30 dates this year, and including I was invited to do his Christmas tour, the Charlie Brown Christmas tour, which will be with youth choirs all around the country.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that tour for like 8 years or so.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Are you actually out doing
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll be road buddies?
We should be.
Beautiful.
Well, it all depends on what comes up between now and then, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking that that'll probably be what'll happen. So when you were being educated, where did you learn the most, from the private lessons or from the high school? Because that was actually a entertainment high school.
Yeah. I would say there wasn't really one thing that like stood out. It was a big combo platter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I think the experience of growing up in New York City during that time and how much music was all around, that alone, and high school, being in a public school with nothing but musicians and artists from all over New York City, it was quite the environment, quite the energy in the school. And not to mention that I had the likes of schoolmates like Omar Hakim, who's played with Sting, and so many other artists, and Marcus Miller, who's played with everybody from Miles Davis to David Sanborn to Luther Vandross. I wasn't the big fish anymore, but it kind of showed me the bar where I needed to be. It was all accumulative, just like all my musical past of playing with different artists that I keep in a bag with me for the next project. So you just accumulate a lot of experience. You know, I was thinking to myself when I was doing another radio interview, you know, you spend the beginning of your career learning what to play. And then and then once you're kind of developed a little bit, you spend the second part of your career what not to play.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Well, it's always a criticism of bassists and drummers.
Yes.
If you play too much, I mean, everybody, wants to play a lot of notes and stuff because it's fun, but that's not always what the groove factor is, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think the more I matured as a bassist, I wanna be musical, and I want to dance around the bass, but at the same time, I don't want my ego to be in the way. I really want it to fit in the song. So when you have that kind of approach, you're really thinking about what's the best for each song. And
right. I
always think about, I want to be like one or two notes short from being almost too simple.
Mm-hmm.
If I can impress this audience, if I say a sentence with 5 words, and it might take me, the dumber Roberto, 50 words to convey that same thing. I look at it with playing the bass too. If I find just the right notes in the right place, each one will be worth more than just look at me. I'm dazzling you with a flurry of notes. Like,
So
Why?
not quantity, but quality.
Quality, yeah, man.
Yeah. Now, when you were going to school, did you do any orchestral training?
Well, that was probably 75% of it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was training with the bow and playing the unedited symphonies from the likes of Handel and Wagner, Mozart, Beethoven, Stravinsky, Brahms. I love that stuff, and I always think that because I practice a lot with the bow, and it wouldn't take that much training for me to get up to speed where I could maybe get a chair in a local orchestra. You know, I ain't gonna win an audition for the LA Philharmonic, but I could probably do something like Valley Symphony or Marina Del Rey and be part of a section, be a double bassist and wear my tux and maybe do some shows like that. I miss that. Because that was, and I think that the classical training that I had got into my DNA as a musician, and to really kind of understand the role of what a bassist should be doing.
Now, are you a proficient reader?
Yeah.
So you can walk into a session and pretty much play it down the first time.
You know, depending on what it is, I've had to read some pretty tough stuff, and I've always been able to do it. But that's a fear, going in, I am a session player, but a lot of times the sessions that I do, there is no music, and I have to think about what I'm going to play on the song. They may have some bass audio that another bass player did, or something that somebody programmed that I have to quickly get under my hands and learn it. Or it could be just a blank slate, and they're going, "Hey, Bert, I'm giving you carte blanche. I want what would Roberto play on this?" Mm-hmm. But I do like to read. Yeah, I've had nightmares of going in and you see the music, and it looks like they dipped a chicken foot in some ink and just let the chicken walk on the staff, and like, how am I supposed to play this? It'll take me a month just to read the first 4 bars.
Right.
But that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, but you didn't in your career. You really didn't go into the orchestral business, like movie scores and television scores and stuff like that. I've
done some TV dates, but not with an orchestra. I was in more of a band, session with drums and bass and keyboards and that kind of thing. Since moving to LA, I did a few orchestral things. The last thing that I did was with Chris Bodie. And when I got the call to do it from the contractor, I thought I would be in the rhythm section, but no, actually they wanted me to play in the orchestra.
No.
So I borrowed a friend's 5-string double bass, and I was the only bass player, and we were part of the orchestra, and it was televised on PBS. And I've done some things with the Marina Del Rey Manchester Symphony. I did some dates, but only a handful, regrettably. Since moving to LA 25 years ago, for the guys and gals that are doing the studio work for the TV and movies, that's a nice niche to get into if you can.
Yeah,
but it's always very very close knit.
Yeah, it's close knit. You get on that list, they call the same people all the time.
Yes, they do.
And then only when somebody isn't available or somebody retires or something, you get to move up on that list.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand the kind of the genre that you're in. Playing any rock bands?
I've done some rock things. I've played a lot of rock over the course of my career in top 40 bands, and I still will occasionally do a corporate party where we're playing top 40. Mm-hmm. And the musicianship is really high level, and I like it because we can be playing Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller in the beginning of the night, and then we'll go up to Justin Timberlake and Beyonce and everything in between. So we'll play disco, we'll play Journey, we'll play Skynyrd, and it'll sound authentic because everybody knows what was on the record.
Yeah.
And so I did some. Well, would you call Hillary Duff rock? No, she's more
pop.
She was pop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to think that my biggest strength is my versatility and my knowledge of playing different styles. You know, I'm never going to play salsa like somebody who was born and raised in Cuba or Puerto Rico. I just can't. It's not ingrained enough. I studied it enough and heard it enough, even as a kid, where I have an idea of tumbao and how the bass works there, and a 17, 18-year-old bassist who lives in a small town in Jamaica who's been playing, and his father was a bass player maybe also. They have a knowledge of that music that I could never play. I can emulate it, and you'd believe it when you heard it. But I know. But me being able to switch and even borrow, and maybe people would think, I don't know if it's a bad word on the radio, if I bastardize something because I'm asked like, can you give me like a rock reggae thing? And I have to like interpret that, or, I'm kind of hearing this kind of like Brazilian calypso thing. And well, Brazilian has nothing to do with calypso. Brazilian music, bossa nova, samba, that's from Brazil. Calypso is from Trinidad. So how do you marry those two together? Well, I think if anybody could do it, I might have a good shot at it because I know enough of the two to get myself in trouble to try to fuse the two together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and you play electric bass and you play the stand-up bass.
Yes,
because you started on that, and that's lucky. I mean, well, not lucky, but it's great that you can do both. Because I know a lot of great bass players, electric bass players, they're not really proficient on the upright.
Yeah, no, it's a completely other animal. A lot of double bass players could play the electric probably a little easier than electric can go to upright, just from the physicality standpoint. But those double bass players that are trying to play electric bass, they could even play all the right notes, but they have no feel at all because they spend all their time practicing etudes and playing with the bow, and it's all perspiration versus inspiration. They don't really know how to approach the song, if you will.
So when somebody asks you to go on tour or go out and do a few shows, do they usually send you like some MP3 files of the songs and charts?
Well, in the old days, they'd send me an envelope with charts, already printed out. But now with the internet and Dropbox and all that, it's easier for people just to have their an artist. They'll have their folder, and they'll just send that out with the MP3s and the PDFs all there. So like, it's funny because I'm going to be doing some Brothers Brown dates in April with Paul Brown, and it's all blues. We're going to do a few of his smooth jazz hits, but he sent me a Dropbox folder. He sent me the link. I grabbed the Dropbox and I downloaded it on my computer. It was all there. And then once I opened up the zip file, and then I have the PDFs and I have the MP3s. So I'll make a new playlist, and these are the songs I'm going to play, and there's the music I'm going to print. Now the big thing is no more hard paper. Everybody's getting all the cool cats are getting the iPad Pro that's big, almost as big as a normal sheet of paper, and they're scanning everything into their iPad, so they have no more music. And with the various applications that you have, you can actually virtually write on the paper also, and you can change notes. Mm-hmm. You can erase things. You can add, whatever you want to it. So I'm kind of gearing up for that, but I just dread the transfer process because I have like 30 books I keep of, Christopher Cross's book, Diane Shore's book, Bobby Caldwell's book, and I just grab them when I need to, and I'll update them. Oh, they have a couple of new songs for the show. So that's how I roll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's one of the good things about technology. It's great for you guys because you can have all of those books on one iPad.
Yeah.
So no matter where you go or who you're going to play with, you've already got it. It's all there. It's all in one spot, and you don't have to shuffle through papers. And it's great for outdoor gigs. You don't have the wind blowing your papers around.
Oh yeah, and it's all
back.
It's all
backlit. You can see.
You can see everything real good. And
yeah, the first time I saw players using that, I was like, wow, that's a great innovation into the music business. I saw Jamie Tate, who I'm sure you know, playing, and he was playing with 5 different bands at a festival.
Right.
He was like the house drummer for everybody.
Yeah.
And he had everything in the iPad. And he would just go from song to song with that iPad. And you know him, he's a sight reader.
He's incredible.
Just play anything. And I'm sure that's a great thing for you guys. Yeah.
It's a great thing as long as it's working.
Yes. There's always
the battery goes out or it takes a fall and you don't have any music.
Or it skips ahead a couple pages that you don't know where you are.
I mean, I think they're really reliable like that. I just my nightmare would be that if the battery unexpectedly
most guys
drained,
I know when they are using them on stage, they haven't plugged in.
They haven't plugged in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they haven't plugged in because you just don't want that even to be a possibility. Even though the batteries in those things last for 10, 12 hours, and you're going to be up there for maybe an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So it's not too much of an issue. But and then they have the little buttons where you can step on.
Yeah, you can turn
advance
the page.
the pages.
Yeah, you can turn the page.
Obviously, your hands are busy.
Yeah, definitely. But I've gotten really good at playing with one hand and flipping music paper. So for me to just tap, swipe my finger across the screen to get on a page, I might save the foot pedals for another time. But I'm just getting the courage to get one of those and spend the time, scanning all the music and transferring it.
Well, some of those artists might already have them scanned, and you could ask
That's
them
true.
for that
Well,
too.
I can always go back to the Dropbox folder and grab them, and then just put them directly into my right into my iPad.
So, without getting too crazy technical, let me ask you another thing, because I think anybody who's listening that is a bass player would want to know, what does Roberto Vally play? What kind of basses do you have in your arsenal?
Well, double basses or electrics?
Let's start with electric.
Okay. Well, I'm basically a Fender guy. I like Fenders. I have a couple of old Fenders. I have a jazz basses. Yeah, that's for those of you who don't know. Jazz bass is a model. It came out in 1960. While the precision bass, the grandfather of electric basses in America, came out in 1951, and I have a 65 jazz. I have a 77 jazz bass. But for most of the stuff that I'm doing for shows and recording, I'm using these hand-built basses by Performance Guitar. This Japanese friend of mine makes these beautiful guitars, and they have 5 strings. So it goes down a major fourth, lower than a regular 4-string bass. So a lot of the modern music that is using synth bass and that kind of thing, I can go down lower than a normal bass guitar would go.
Right.
So I'm about 6 or 7 electric basses. I have a precision bass. I have a fretless bass, meaning that there's no metal on the fingerboard. There's just lines, so you can place your fingers accurately.
You can slide your fingers.
You can slide around like on a double bass, because on a double bass all you have is a piece of wood. And as far as acoustic basses, I have 3 right now. I like to buy and sell them. You know, I'm just fascinated with old double basses, and the older, the more exotic for me. I've actually flipped. I've lost money doing it, and I've made a tidy sum also finding instruments that I know are way undervalued, and if I have the capital to get them, I'll buy it. I'll keep it for a while. I may have a little work done on them, and then I can sell them for big money. But those deals and steals are hard to come by. But
yeah,
I'd have to play a lot of gigs to profit $30,000. But I've made that in flipping basses.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So my bass that I just acquired from a guy that made millions revolutionizing the electric bass. His name is Ken Smith, and we've been friends. I bought an instrument from him back in the 80s. I bought my first 6-string bass from Ken, and back in December I flew to Philadelphia to see his collection. And he's got old Italians, old English. We're talking about basses in the 6 figures for a double bass. And I tried one of his lower end basses that was from Germany, made in Berlin in 1910, and I completely fell in love with it. And he agreed to sell it to me. So that's my first instrument. What I bring into the recording studio. Mm-hmm. I won't bring it to a club. I have other instruments, to do that. But for something where I'm just going to use a microphone and get that really true, rich acoustic bass sound, that's my go-to bass.
It's amazing how big they are, especially once you put them in a case.
Oh yeah,
monstrous.
Totally.
So you got to have a big car. You must have a van.
Yeah, I have a van. But I mean, hey, I had a Prius. I could put my double bass and an amp in a Prius. I won't put it in a hard shell case like a shipping case.
Oh, uh-huh.
But a gig bag could go in with a Prius and a small amp. I'm good.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about having one of my basses converted to having a removable neck.
Oh. Uh-huh.
So it's a removable neck system where, and they're selling cases now for the traveling bassists. So you're knocking, instead of the case being 7 feet tall, you're talking about a case that's 4.5 feet tall,
mm-hmm.
and the neck goes inside with the body, and then you could put it together in 5-10 minutes.
You also have electric stand-up bass too, though, right? It's
I do.
Just that it has no body,
mm-hmm.
really, or it might have a small body, right?
Very, very small. It's the bridge that the strings are pressing down on is sitting on a piece of spruce, and it's all getting amplified electronically like a bass guitar. There's no microphone, if you will. And actually, I use that bass, the same bass I'm playing with David Benoit, I used on the Christopher Cross
Right. I remember
tour.
you playing that.
So you mixed that bass many, many times. It sounded pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're amazing. They sound wonderful, and they're easy to get around because they break down into a more manageable case.
I put it up in the overhead most of the time. I just carry it onto the plane, stick it up in the overhead.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a trade-off, but I've used them on record dates, and that bass has been on a couple of big hits, and it has a really cool sound.
Mm-hmm. What about pedals? Do you use any kind of effects pedals or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. I usually, when I break out my 4-string, I'll take out a little pedal board, so I'll have an octaver, so I'll play a note. I'll play A, and it'll give me an octave below it, so it sounds like a guitar and a bass. So I could get down pretty low, and it reproduces the sub octave, pretty nicely. Mm-hmm. So I use that to compensate only having 4 strings, and I have a little chorus pedal, and I have a analog delay pedal also if I'm doing something a little more soloistic, and I want a little repeat at the end. Hello, right, like that kind of thing.
Sure.
So I have that, but most of the time, 90% of what I do, I just plug in my bass and go
clean and clear.
Clean and clear.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And bass amps? Any particular loves there?
I have two that I like, and I found the two at a in a very short span. I went up to Yoshi's to do some shows with Bobby, and they had this amplification system that the company who built it left it there for them, saying, "Here, go ahead, we're giving you this. Let your bass players try it." And I freaked out. I thought, man, this stuff sounds great. It's a company called Trickfish.
You know, it's funny because I advanced that show for you guys.
Yes.
And the production manager at Yoshi's was telling me, he's saying, you know, we have this bass amp here and everybody loves it. He even mentioned Marcus Miller had come in and loved it. And I said, well, you know, you can tell me that all you want, but I don't know for sure that Roberto is going to like this or not. Mm-hmm. But apparently you did. So that's great.
By the time you spoke with them, Roberto, I already tried it. I knew about it for a while. And when I was driving home from Yoshi's with my sweetheart, she was driving, and I was going on the internet looking for, like, I got to find Trickfish. I got to find them. And
so you could buy one?
I called her, and I actually spoke to one of the founders who just passed away a few months ago.
Oh.
Yeah, regrettably, man. It was I didn't even know he was sick. But we developed a friendship, and so I love Trickfish. And soon after, 3 months after I found out about Trickfish, I was doing a CD release party and some shows in Holland. And I have a good bass brother who has a bass boutique guitar shop with only basses. And he took me to a bass amp builder in the north of Holland. And I got a double whammy. After hearing Trickfish and loving them, I found this guy, Mark Vanderklay, and he makes really great speakers and amplifiers as well. You cannot get it as easily in America, but I ordered the whole thing, kit and caboodle, from him. So,
what's the name of that company?
Vanderklay.
Okay.
Out of Holland.
Okay.
Insane gear, especially for me, their speakers, and a lot of it has to do with the drivers, the speakers that are inside the cabinets. Mm-hmm. They're made in Italy, and I have never found a lightweight neodymium, I think that's what you call it, the lightweight speakers that sound so warm and could handle so much volume out of a neodymium, and it's not harsh. It's really nice, smooth, and clear.
And do you normally like bass amps that have 10-inch speakers or 12s or I'm kind of partial to 10. Although seems to be the most popular thing.
Although
out there.
in Texas, the other owner of Trickfish lived in Houston, and he brought me a rig to play. And Richard, who passed away, Richard Ruse, the last thing that he worked on was a cabinet that has 4 8-inch speakers in it.
Oh.
So it was extremely small, extremely lightweight, but you're pushing 32 inches of paper movement, and that sounded pretty amazing with my electric upright bass.
Probably very clear.
Very clear, very quick, and very tight, and not boomy.
Yeah.
Or spongy. It was very direct, and yeah, I'm anxious to maybe add one of those to my collection.
All right. Do you like gear? You like buying basses and stuff when you find something you like?
Yeah, I do. I said I have 2 jazz basses, but I also mentioned one that I'm in the process of getting from a girl who had her father's bass under her bed in Atlanta. It's that 65 jazz bass. And yeah, they're not cheap. But I just like old. When the condition is good, I'm looking at it as an investment that I can probably. I'm getting it at a great price, and probably in 5 or 10 years, depending on what the market does, I'll sell it and I'll make a profit. Hopefully,
right? Yeah. Same with guitars. Yeah, I know the old guitars. It's like amazing. The price of the vintage stuff just keeps going up and up and up.
Oh yeah,
because you can't make old. Right? It's either old or it's new.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember these, like you talk about a bass bow. what you use to draw sound from an acoustic bass, the bow,
Right.
just the bow. Back when I was in high school, 14, 15, I heard about this maker in France, Sue Lipkins, the senior in high school, the best bassist, who was studying with the professor at Juilliard. She had this bow made by Louis Morizot, and they were blowing them out in the violin stores for $500, okay, for a bow, which I thought was an insane amount of money back then.
Yeah, for a stick, basically.
For a stick.
Yeah.
A carved stick. Yeah, it's a little more than a carved stick, but you know what I'm saying. So, yeah, those bows now are probably, $6,000 to $8,000.
Wow.
So I imagine like if I bought like 10 of them, back then and just kept them, for 20, 30 years, and I'd have a nice down payment on a house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, well, that goes for lots of stuff. Yeah.
Sure.
Vintage microphones and outboard gear and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So we talked a little bit before we started recording this, and you have a new song that's climbing up the charts. You want to tell us about that? How'd that get started? Who's it with? And
Sure.
anything you can tell me about that?
Yeah, so it was soon after I released independently my second CD entitled Pure Lines. I got a text from a friend of mine who has a record label. He's in Florida, and he has Darren Rand and Paul Brown and Marc Antoine signed to his label. And he knows me as a songwriter because when he's getting the credits of who's playing on the records, and Roberto Vally's playing bass. Oh, Roberto Vally wrote Say It Like You Mean It. Okay. So we developed a friendship, and from time to time he would text me or call me and ask me about what I thought about this song or this song, and would that be a good song for so-and-so and whatever. So I get a text from him about wanting to do something with a prominent bass line, something like Birdland. And I said, great, man. And yeah, and I didn't know he was talking about wanting me to do it. So a few days later, he called me, and I said, yeah, man, I think Birdland would be a great song if it was done nice. Who's the artist you have in mind for it? He said, I'm talking to him, Roberto. I want to give you a recording contract to release a maxi single. So that's rare these days.
What's a maxi single?
A maxi single is one song done 3 or 4 different ways, different versions of it. So I chose to have one featuring the saxophone as the soloist, and I have another version that features the keyboards as soloist. And then the third version is the radio edit so it could be played on commercial radio under 4 minutes. Mm-hmm. So we had to chop it up. And then the fourth version was done by an engineer, keyboardist, producer. We did a remix of it and completely changed it around. He re-recorded stuff, reprogrammed drums, and it's extremely different and chill. And so that's
Is that more like a dance version, maybe?
No, I would say more of a chill version, if you will. Yeah, more eclectic. But I really like it, and some radio stations are actually playing the remix. And the song that we chose was Birdland, and it's climbing up the charts. I'm happy to say it just broke top 50, and it's only been out 2 weeks today. It came out. And it's tied at number 2 for most increased spins. So I'm curious to see, how far it's going to go. But I have to say, I'm just so happy having had the opportunity to do something like that, especially on the dime of a record label who had faith in me and wanted to see me step out of the back and maybe be an artist myself.
Now, where did you record this?
Well, I recorded it in many different places, actually. That's how we do it. I just didn't go in the studio with my friends and make this thing. I called my buddy from Spyro Gyra days, who's an amazing keyboardist and programmer, and I called Tom Schumann. I thought, who's going to help me do Birdland? So I called Tom, and he said, yeah, man, I'd love to help out. I'll play some keyboards on it. Well, the very next day, he sent me an MP3 of Birdland, all done. He played everything. I could have just replaced the bass with my bass if I wanted to, and it would have been done. But I used what he graciously did, as like the template, if you will, the foundation to build on top of. So I went to Las Vegas to his studio, and we kind of worked with the arrangement a little bit. I had him redo some keyboard ideas that I was thinking, and then I played my bass. We lifted his bass off, and I took that back to Los Angeles with me, and I played it for a few friends, and they go, yeah, man, it's cool. It sounds too much like the original, really. So where's Roberto? I want to hear more of Roberto. Mm-hmm. So I started muting things and just hearing the important events of what made Birdland, and came up with the idea of importing some loops into with the same tempo in it, giving it a whole different flair, whole different sound, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get a live drummer to do it and use the loops together and see how it has this like little bubbling machine, underneath. And I thought, man, what would wah wah guitar be like on it? It's just Johnny Guitar Watson-ish kind of guitar. Uh-huh. And I thought, yeah, you know what? It's kind of going south. It's going, well, when I mean south, I'm going like Louisiana Bayou, like Little Feat meets Miles Davis, whatever. So I had the idea of putting some Hammond organ and taking it to church also. And then I got my friend Greg Vale, who plays amazing saxophone. He just got the job with Luis Miguel, and he did a horn arrangement and put horns in on it.
Real horns?
Yeah, real. Nice. Yeah. So I'm very proud of how.
And who played the drums?
Gordon Campbell played drums.
Any guitar?
There's some guitar. Who my friend Jeff Carruthers, who co-produced and co-wrote both my albums with me. He helped me with the programming and loops and doing stuff like that, and I got him to play some wah-wah guitar on it.
So if people want to hear this, they can find it on iTunes probably and all the places, Amazon or whatever.
Yes, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon.
And it's just called Birdland.
Yeah, if you're
the artist, Roberto Vally.
You have Alexa. Hey Alexa, play Birdland, Roberto Vally, and you can hear it. You can hear it for free. Mm-hmm. If you want to download it, people can get it at iTunes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's only available pretty much as a digital download.
Right. Yeah.
The only hard copies were sent to DJs around the country. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I know that you've written some other songs that have done quite well too, with some big artists like Boney James.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always liked to write, and of course, as a bass player, I'm hearing bass all the time in my brain. Can't shut it off sometimes. So. Back in my early days, when I first came to California, and before Boney became the big star that he is, big artist, we were writing songs. So I have some songs on his earlier records, and up to maybe 4 or 5 records, I always had a song or two on his records. And I started giving my song ideas to producers like Paul Brown, who played them for artists like Rick Braun and Richard Elliott and Patty Austin, and they liked what they heard. And they're thinking, man, I'm hearing all kind of melodies. So I intentionally left the songs in kind of a demo state to entice the artist to want to contribute, just to have enough in there where there's a vibe and a groove, but they would want to contribute their talent and their composing over my thing. Yeah.
So you're kind of leaving it open to be, instead of trying to be the songwriter, you're trying to leave it open to be a co-written song with the artist, because a lot of artists maybe wouldn't even put something on their record unless they were writing.
I left it blank so as not to confuse them, because they might have a whole different idea. And it's always been interesting, to say the least, to see what people come up with on my song, where they would go with a melody, Sometimes I've been like totally floored, like knocked out, like Kirk Whalum being one. And that song went to number one in R&R and Billboard. That was my first number one song. And he played this melody that was from the heavens. And I had similar success with the number one with Bob James, the keyboardist who played on the TV show Hill Street Blues, and he's one of the founders of the band Foreplay. We had a song we wrote together called Morning, Noon, and Night. That was a number one. And most recently, Richard Elliott took one of my grooves and ran with it and wrote this song called Lip Service, and that was number one for 6 weeks on the smooth jazz charts. Mm-hmm. So it's fun. It's fun to collaborate and hear what other people would contribute on your songs. And I had enough confidence in myself that I didn't let my ego get in the way. It's like, these are not, it's not my life's work. It's something that I felt at the time. I put it together. You like it? Great. You want to put it on your record? Fantastic. But when I chose to do songs for me, I went more personal, a little bit more deeper into what kind of musical self-portrait I wanted to portray. Mm-hmm. So,
and you mentioned before you have two Roberto Vally CDs.
Yeah,
what are the names of them again?
Yeah, my first one I made. It was released in 2014. It was called Boom Boom Boom. Mm-hmm. And Boom 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 I used for homage of my daddy, who's in heaven, who used to ask me when I was younger. He never really understood the bass when I was a kid. He was like, Roberto, I don't know. You want to play the bass? What is the bass doing? The boom, 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 boom. Why don't you want to play the violin? The violin is in the front. It has the melody. And I'm saying, Dad, I like the boom, boom, boom. That's what I want to. That's what I want to do. So I'm glad he saw me play with groups like Spyro and Michael, and when I would take a solo and I'd have thousands of people on their feet, and I think he understood, my attraction to the bass. Mm-hmm. So Boom 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 came out, and about a year ago, I released my second album called Pure Lines. And again, from the same palette of instrumentation, I really love the sound of the accordion when it's played nicely. So it has a little bit of an Italian, French, Argentinian flair. Because I'm mixing it up with reggae grooves and jazz and tango. So it's because you and I we've traveled so much around the world, and I wanted that world beat in the music that I gave that had my name on it. Mm-hmm. Contrast to Birdland that I didn't write, but I wanted to give my spin on. I approached that a little bit differently, but at the same time wanted it to stand out, as something that I kind of put my stamp on.
Right. Now, when you write, do you write your songs playing the bass, or do you play guitar or keyboards or something else?
What I'm doing now is thinking about a bass line and thinking about drums that would kind of work with the bass line, and that'll be kind of my foundation. I'm thinking about a bass line like one, ga-doom, doom, 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 ba-boom, doom, ga-doom, doom. And I'll just kind of hear that, and I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. And I'll figure out like a little drum thing that I'll program that fits that. It has a vibe, all in itself. Like if I can make this bass and these drums interesting, where even if I could get it where somebody would want to like tune into it, even for 30 seconds, there's a song there somewhere. And I build on it from there. I'm fascinated with people who can write and they hear the whole thing in their head, where mine is more like a layering kind of thing.
You're a good person to collaborate with, then.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think I'd be.
Get somebody that's good with the melodies and lyrics, and put them with you, and
we'd have a hit factory.
Yeah. Let's do that. Yeah, that sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
So, Roberto Vally, any other things that you're aspiring to do that you haven't done yet? Or just keep doing what you're doing and keep getting better at it and being more successful?
Well, I guess the next step for me would be to have... I'm not really going to solicit it a whole lot myself. I've never really had to or wanted to bang on doors, and like for having a recording contract, I've known many a friend who asked many record labels who got turned down. And how would I happen to get something like fall into my lap? So if a promoter, friend or stranger would approach me, maybe, God willing, and say, man, I heard Birdland, and then I listened to I went on the web and I heard Boom Boom Boom, and gosh, man, we're doing this festival in Fresno or whatever, and how'd you like to play 45 minutes with your band?
Yeah.
So that would be something that would be really cool for me that I have not done with all the probably thousands of shows that I've done as a sideman, to be able to play my music live. I've only, I did that one time for a few shows in Germany a few years ago when I was in Europe with Randy, and we would play a few songs before she would come on the stage. So I got a chance to do, one or two of my songs. That was cool to hear them played, live in a live situation. But
that would be fun.
Now besides that, I want to just continue playing and writing, and it's amazing, like that TV show that I like to watch from time to time, these, the grandfather, the father, and the son. They have a pawn shop. It's called Pawn Stars, and part of the sizzle in the beginning of the show is like, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I'll tell you one thing, you never know what's going to come through that door. And I could relate to that a lot, because as a musician working freelance in LA, it's amazing what's come through my door, and I feel so fortunate having the opportunities I've had. So I don't know what could happen. I'm happy to know that I have a pretty good fair amount of work through the end of the year, but it's always those unexpected projects and musical experiences that'll come in that really make what we do so rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so you're still an open book.
I'm still an open book.
Yeah. That's great.
I do have a studio in my house,
mm-hmm.
and much like yours, where I'm writing there, and I'm also playing bass for other artists right out of my house. So if anybody has a song out there who that needs some Roberto Vally bass love, they could contact me. If I could say, I'm on Facebook. And my email address is rpvally, Vally, at AOL.com. And I guarantee my work. And I make sure that that my friend, my client is happy with it. So you send me the track, I download it, I play on it, and then I send my bass performance, or I'll send a few of my performances so you could pick what you want, and people edit whatever. And then I upload it, and I send it, and and they're happy.
Yeah. Well, everybody's doing that now.
Yes.
Drummers do it. I do it. People send me stuff, mix it here, send it back to them. You know, so yeah, it's the way this business works now.
Oh yeah,
yeah, cool. Okay, so one other thing. Now we'll just gets into the weeds here a little bit.
Okay. I got my machete.
You're the most Italian guy I know.
Am I?
Yeah. Well, I'm half Italian. You're a real Italian.
I'm a real wop. Yeah.
Because I know when we were on the road together, man, you would always be talking about your mama's sauce and the food. And
did you hear
if
me?
You're not Italian.
Did you hear me speak a little Italian when we were in Italy?
Yeah.
I remember that we had 3 days off, and we were in Barletta, which is less than an hour train ride from my daddy's birthplace. So I remember the first day off, I went alone on the train south to Bari, and my dad's village. And I just spent the whole day alone. And I had been there 3 or 4 times before. And then the second day, I took Andy and the whole band, the drummer, please, Beyer.
Yeah, Dave Beyer.
Dave Beyer and the whole group went with me on the train, and we went to Bari, to the church of San Nicolo, where my grandmother used to go to, and we ate at lunch in this beautiful cafe. And on the way back up to Barletta, they continued on the train going north, and I got out and went back to Giovinazzo, where my dad lived. He grew up there. So that was, you want to talk about gifts from God. Like, how would it be that this kid from New York goes to LA, I'm playing with Christopher Cross, we're doing shows in Italy, and I have 3 days off paid, because we were getting salary per day on the road, and I'm like, an hour from my dad's birthplace.
Yeah.
Just to go into a coffee place there for €1 and have the best cappuccino in the world.
Right.
So what do you want to ask me about Italian and whatever?
Just mentioning, just your love of food and everything, which is like, it just kind of cracks me up because, you don't run into that many people that understand that culture.
Yeah.
The food culture and the Italians, it's just like, it's all consuming. This is the most important thing in my dad's life was food.
Yeah.
And then I, as a father, have kind of imparted that on my kids, and they're all into food too. It's like it's a thing. And I mean, this has nothing to do with music or anything, but I just think it's kind of interesting. In
a way, I think it does have to do with music. I think it's like people that love food who can get joy. Like for me, to make a dinner for somebody, because I am not a wealthy man. I cannot invite people to my yacht or drive around on my nice Maserati, but I can make a meal and I can put my heart and soul into it. And that's what that's what I try to do with my bass too. So I try to, now that we're talking about it, I try to incorporate that same love and putting that same kind of soul in my music, in the sauce, if you will. So I guess it's a kind of a mentality, and
it's a passion.
you want to look at it. And growing up in Brooklyn, well, I grew up with mostly Jewish people, even though I'm Catholic Italian.
But they're very much very similar.
Very, very similar.
Very similar.
The joke, I forget the Italian comedian talking about like his Passover dinners, and like Jewish people don't know how to cook, But I love the Jewish faith. I love the culture. Growing up there, it was a very charmed life being in a Jewish neighborhood. But my Italian friends, it was like the mothers were interchangeable, and there was always tons of food. And, I remember I was so happy to eat over. I was like about 5, and I ate at Howard Blum's house around the corner. It was one of my friends, and his mom gave us a bowl of pasta. I swear, she had a bowl of pasta, nothing on it, just pasta, and put a bottle of ketchup on the table and said, "Okay, guys, dinner's served." And that was my dinner, and I ate it, and I loved it because I loved ketchup and mixing it up with spaghetti. It was a meal. Well, I went home and I told my parents, and my mom, they couldn't stop laughing. They called their brothers and sisters. "Hey, Robert, he had dinner over at his friend's house, and they gave him pasta with ketchup."
Ketchup, yeah. That's like sacrilege, though. For Italians.
I tell, because my second wife was Norwegian, and her mom would make a killer pizza. But for me, it had nothing to do with pizza because she'd put pineapple in it and bacon and ground beef, and it was this hodgepodge. And they called it pizza, and they'd serve it, and they'd put a bottle of ketchup on the table, and they'd pour ketchup on top of the pizza, and they would eat it. And I thought, man, if you would go to like my neighborhood and go to a like Lenny and John's Pizzeria or Da Vinci's or whatever, and you ask them for a bottle of ketchup, they'd either like laugh and just ignore you, or they'd throw you out. They would get either way. It wouldn't be good.
Yeah, that's funny. I just thought, I don't know. I just think it's always a funny thing to me about the Italian culture about the eating thing, because like my wife is not Italian at all, and I remember it took her a little while to figure out that, hey, this is really important to this guy. You got to eat, and I don't like to just throw food down my throat. I sit down and have a nice take the time to eat it.
Oh yeah,
and not just throw stuff in your mouth. It's just a thing.
It's always as a child, a lot of the holidays, and it was all centered around the kitchen and around food.
Oh yeah,
you'd have the appetizer first, with the cheese and the olives and the salami and some marinated peppers, roasted peppers and maybe some sliced fried artichoke, artichoke hearts. And, you'd have that. Then they would take that away, if there was anything left. And then you'd have the little soup with the little veal meatballs, the little white meatballs. And then we'd have like the minestrone, right? Then the pasta would come out with some side dishes you'd put maybe in the pasta, meatballs, sausage, braciole, some fried eggplant. You put it in Sicilian style. Okay, then the main course would come out, and then after the main course, there'd be a little break, and then there would be the nuts and the fruit, the finocchio. It's like a big swollen celery. You ever have this?
Yeah, it's kind of a licorice taste.
Right? Licorice, licorice, and apples and different fruits and nuts and stuff. Okay, then we'd have that, and then the last thing would be the pastries, the cannoli, the Napoleons, and the rum, the Italian rum cake, and all that. So by the end of the dinner, you're just like you have to be wheeled out.
Yeah, and what's funny is you go to Italy and you expect to see all these big, huge, fat people, and they're not.
No,
they're not.
No,
but they eat like that.
Well, they walk.
Yeah.
And they, the wine, I guess, helps them digest it, but they're not drinking to get drunk. They're just drinking it to celebrate life.
Meal.
And it's part of the meal. And, I'm proud of my heritage.
Yeah, I know you are.
I'm proud of it. And, but I'm also proud that my dad gave me the chance. My mother was born in the States, but her parents were both from Sicily. So I had a first generation mother and an immigrant father who had the accent, and he was beyond old school, which presented its drawbacks as a teenager growing up in New York City and a musician, he just didn't get it. All my friends could stay out till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd have to be home at 10 o'clock. And if he let me stay out till 10:30, it was a big deal.
Huh?
Yeah. It was a big deal. He was incredibly talented, and I maybe got my ears from him. My mom could carry a tune; she was a good singer, but Dad never had the chance, and because he was in southern Italy, that's why he left Italy, because there wasn't much opportunity, and he had a chance to come to America through his older brother who was already here, and got my dad to come over with grandma and the younger brothers and sisters. And my dad basically was the head of household in Little Italy, and then he met my mom. But thanks to him, I had the opportunity to pursue my passion that he never could do because he was too busy having to put
making a living for the
money
family,
on the table
course.
for the family, both in Italy and in America. So
it was tough times for them.
It was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough. I kind of understood when I went there to Italy, and I saw the abandoned steel factory where he worked. It's still there. You can see it from the train station. It's as big as LAX. It's huge, and there was so much when it closed in the 80s, Ross. There was so much contamination with chemicals and asbestos and all kind of stuff. They didn't even knock it down. They just built a wall around it and just letting it just like letting the years and the earth make it tone it down a little bit, because I guess they were afraid to break it all up would just release all this crazy stuff in the air.
Yeah.
So, but that's where he worked with his brothers and his dad, and they were happy that they had work, in the steel factory.
Sure.
But it closed in the 80s, but he left in the 50s. So,
well, Roberto, this has been a lot of fun for me.
Fun for me too.
Yeah,
Thanks,
talking
man.
to you and hearing all these great things about your career and your life and your Italian heritage. It's good fun. We're going to say goodbye, and I just want to thank you for you drove out to my house, which is a big plus. Make life a little easier for me.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, man. It was a nice surprise. And looking forward to doing the Christmas tour with you.
Yeah. All right, man. Okay, Roberto, we're going to say goodbye. Bye, everybody, and signing off, Roberto Vally. Bye-bye.
The Rossaround podcast wants to thank my good friend Tim Heinz for the original music that you are listening to now. We are currently looking for sponsors for the Rossaround Backstage podcast so that we can continue to bring you interesting stories like the one that you just heard. I can be reached through Facebook or email me at rosspallone@me.com. Thank you for listening.